Well, I've seen you referred to as his slowliness.
I'm not sure where you saw that, but I've been called that in the past.
Uh, Tell me about kind of the definition of where that nickname for you came from, what it applies to.
I think the nickname came from the simple fact that I was the first Canadian president of Slow Food and was the president for 4 years, and I'm now the international counselor on the Slow Food Board in Italy for Canada.
Describe the concept of slow food.
It's not an easy concept to describe. Slow Food is the largest culinary organization in the world. It calls itself an eco-gastronomic organization. In some parts of the world it's more ecological, in other parts of the world it's more gastronomic. And this organization really tries to protect both food traditions and food cultures where they exist, and particularly foods that are very high quality artisanal foods that need to be preserved and may be endangered. It also talks about encouraging food cultures and cuisines and regional cuisines to be developed in countries where they don't necessarily, or where they're being lost, in countries such as Canada and the United States. A sort of a simplified regional food system where people could eat sustainably in a period of global warming. And then slow food recently has become known for 3 particular bywords. One is good, which means good, flavorful food; clean, which means safe, sanitary food; and fair. And by fair, what they mean is that people be properly remunerated for the food that they produce, and that they be properly treated while they're producing that food.
And I think this is the Sooke Harbour House, and your dining room would seem to be the quintessential definition of that whole concept.
In many ways, Sooke Harbour House is an example of what slow food can be in North America. 95% of our food is regional. It comes primarily from Vancouver Island. Our gardens are organic. We have a large garden staff. We raise many of our own animals. We have just leased a farm up the street, which is the original farm for Sooke Harbour House. We do eat slowly. We appreciate the food that we eat. We take our time to eat that food. And we encourage conversation amongst people and the rebuilding not only of relationships, but also the maintenance of the community that we live in, both the social community and also the food community.
Yeah, I think it's remarkable because you have found a way around using lemon and lime just based on the acidity from that. You can get it from your gardens, correct?
Well, that's quite true. We don't use lemons at all. We have them here for mixed drinks, but we don't encourage people to use it. But in many parts of the world where they don't have lemon, they've always had acidity. It's an important component of daily eating. I used to live in France. They didn't use lemons there. You won't see a lemon in any of the traditional cuisine. You won't see a lemon in a recipe up until about the 80s. Now lemons are starting to sneak in, but there's no reason to use a lemon that might come from California or Mexico or some other part of the world, and may come in either by truck, which is a major source of global warming, or by plane, which is a major source of global warming.
And another one of your areas of concern is development, housing development, and how it is taking away from what would be sustainable food sources within our own communities.
I think this is true in many parts of the world. The threat of development, particularly poorly planned development, will remove a number of traditional food sources for us. As global warming develops, we need our farms. We shouldn't be putting parking lots on our farms. We shouldn't be destroying our farms. We should be encouraging farmers and maintaining those lands. We're going to need them. But we also often forget in privileged areas such as North America that we have very beautiful forests, and those forests have always supplied indigenous people from our continent and other parts of the world with berries and quite a lot of wild foods. And of course, there are terrific, it's not just things like berries and other wild foods, but particularly mushrooms as well, which are quite an extraordinary culinary delight. And it's something that we really need to start thinking about. Where is our food going to, in a period of global warming, food shortages, and population growth, where is our food going to come from?
Mm-hmm. Now, lastly, I've never eaten at the herb farm, but I have to think that you and Ron Zimmerman at the herb farm would have a fair number of things in common, including regionality on your wine list.
In terms of food and food philosophy, Ron Zimmerman and Carrie Van Dyke and I are like peas in a pod. We have a lot of similarities. And when it comes to wine lists, even though both the Herb Farm and the Sooke Harbour House have very, very interesting international selections on their wine list, primarily what we focus on and understand and sell is regional wine. So in our restaurant, for instance, I would say at least 85% of the wines we sell, and probably closer to 90, come from within British Columbia itself. And I would think that most of the wines that Ron sells come from within this region as well.
Take us through the food and wine pairing aspect of it here.
You know, within our Northwest region, we produce some pretty extraordinary wines, and as good wines as anywhere else in the world. And if you travel to Italy or regional France or other parts of the world, they don't drink wines from across the world. They drink the wines of their region primarily. These food cultures have grown over time, and wine and food naturally go together, and people actually cook with the wines of their region. So what grows together goes together. And in our more northerly climate, both in parts of Oregon and Washington State and British Columbia, we have wines that are ideally suited for food pairing. And one of the important things to remember is when you're pairing food, most of the time, 80 or 85% of the time, you're looking for a medium body wine, which describes a lot of the wines from our region. Preferably you're looking for wine with lower alcohol, which makes it much easier to pair. That may be changing a bit in our regions, but still you can find a lot of lower alcohol wines that go very well with food. An important component in wine and food pairing is good acidity, particularly to balance out dishes or refresh dishes. And we have good acidity, which is fundamental in our local wines, and something that you find in many of them. And low oak is really important because oak doesn't necessarily go well with most foods. And these are four things that you can easily find in the wines of the Pacific Northwest.